The mission of my business is building a business that serves my family instead of my family serving a business, and to help my clients do the same.
You're listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with your host, Michael Palmer. Listen each week as inspiring guests share their secrets of success to help you increase your confidence, work smarter, and build a business you love. This episode of The Successful Bookkeeper is brought to you by PureBookkeeping.com, the proven system to grow your bookkeeping business.
Welcome back to the Successful Bookkeeper Podcast. I am your host, Michael Palmer, and today's show is going to be a very interesting one. Our guest is the owner of Daniels Business Solutions based in Tennessee, and she's also a Pure Bookkeeping licensee, Becky Daniels. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, it's great to have you. And I just always love hearing the business journey of our licensees. And in fact, bookkeepers in general, it's always been, for me, something of interest to hear how things got started, how they ended up that way. It's been a curiosity my whole life. So I love these episodes. And so Becky, tell us a little bit about your career journey leading up to this point as we get into this.
I'd love to. I have a pretty non-traditional journey to where I am. I like to call myself a recovering engineer. I studied industrial engineering in school, and it was the most natural thing in the world. Industrial is basically like systems engineering. So anything from your computer systems to manufacturing systems. And what I was really planning to focus on are medical practices and hospitals, as far as like developing their efficiencies in their processes and their different systems. And but I graduated in December of 2001, right after September 11th, and there just flat out were not jobs available. So I just took what I could get, which ended up being light manufacturing, and it was just truly awful. And as most first jobs out of school tend to be, I did learn a lot, though, about how not to run a business, which has been truly valuable in the long term. So once I decided to leave that position, I ended up actually in pharmaceutical sales. And I don't remember ever taking out my sales pieces and showing them to the doctors. Instead, I built relationships by doing little projects in their practice. I would help them by doing the things that I was doing that I had wanted to do anyway. And the reason I had kind of stumbled upon that being where I wanted to be, my dad was a physician. I had worked in his office from the time I was 12 on. And when I was about that age, he went and got an MBA for physicians. At the time, it was one of the first programs of its sort in the country. And he explained to me that you go to medical school and then you're expected to come out a small business owner, but you know absolutely nothing about running a business. And that always stuck with me because I knew that wasn't the only profession where this was happening. And so over time, I was in that sales position for about 10 years before my drug was falling off the product life cycle, and a bunch of us got laid off. And it was at a time I had a baby at home, was pregnant with a new one. So I decided to stay home for a little bit. But after about a year, I started helping a small business owner, and he's a New York Times bestselling author, and he travels around the country. And I just started helping him do little things in his business. I could do it from home. I could do it, before my kids got up, all of those things. And as my kids got older, I was looking at the horizon, and I genuinely could not imagine a scenario where I would leave my house and go to an office. That just seemed bizarre and unusual to me at this point, especially since I had been in outside sales for 10 years. And so I really started to look at, I loved supporting a small business owner. I felt like I was genuinely contributing all the time. And so I started looking at what are my skills? How could I translate those into something more significant? And I knew after a while that what I really wanted to do was help small business owners build their financial systems in a stronger way. Most of us call that advisory, and it certainly is. But in my mind, it's a system. In school, I learned widgets in, widgets out, and in the accounting world, it's dollars in, dollars out, and figuring out how to maximize those dollars out within the system of a business is what I really do with my clients. But I felt like before I could fully embark on that, I must have the bookkeeping piece under control and second nature, so that I was truly speaking the vernacular of business in that regard and had that really solid knowledge base before I was getting into the advisory stuff. And so now mostly I do advisory. I have a team that does most of the bookkeeping, and with the exception of a few specific clients. And I love it. I absolutely love it. And I love knowing that I have good data to work off of instead of outside bookkeeping that I'm trying to make business decisions with.
That's beautiful. What a wonderful journey. And just listening to the way you spoke about what you do for business owners, I can imagine that's a very good, just even saying that is a very good sales strategy and positioning of your business to be able to do what you're going to do for them, right? Dollars in, dollars out, maximizing the dollars that do come out of that and building a system around that. You're not selling bookkeeping, you're selling a unique system that you create, which is no one else can compete with you.
Well, Michael, the mission of my business is building a business that serves my family instead of my family serving a business, and to help my clients do the same. So most of my clients, there are just a couple of specific exceptions, but most of my clients are family-owned businesses that one of the questions I always ask is, when I'm determining if it's somebody I want to work with, is, are you building a business to scale quickly and sell? Or do you dream of having a grandchild one day run this business? And while they don't have to answer with either of those extremes, the way they answer gives me a lot of insight into what they're trying to build. And I'm in it for family type businesses that they're trying to build to serve their families, and in the same way that I am. And that way I just know that our missions are aligned and what's most important to us is aligned. And that tends to, I tend to hit it off with those folks when...
I bet you do. I imagine there's not many people that come into their office and ask that question.
Right.
What's been some interesting answers to that question?
Well, there was one time that I learned that they were looking to grow and sell, but it was really that they were looking to stabilize and sell. So it was it had been in the family for 40, 50 years, but the most recent generation had started something tangential, and so they needed to sell this part of the business so that they could support this other business that they had grown. And so it was more that they needed to stabilize that business to sell it for the highest amount. And that's what I'm saying. Like, even though that was yes, we're looking to sell, it still really supported my mission and the way I'm looking at things, in that it was an existing business and it was something that was going to serve their family. So it was a great connection in that regard. And that was an interesting answer. And then I've had, a dentist who said, oh goodness, I hope my grandkids aren't dentists. I hope they have other opportunities. But digging in further, you find that the way he wants to create those opportunities is by building this dental practice. So he doesn't want his grandkids running the business, but he wants to be sure he's growing a better life for them by growing a big, stable business. And then occasionally, it's someone who's like, oh yeah, I want to sell within 2 years. And I'm like, well, it was very nice talking to you.
I want to sell and spend all the money before my grandkids.
Right. I see it very much like buying clothes from Patagonia or buying fast fashion. I'm looking for the folks who are building Patagonia, not who are trying to make a quick profit. There is nothing wrong with making a quick profit. It's just not my expertise. It's not the way I am structured in building a business.
So interesting. I love these questions. And just to jump back to another piece of what you said is the experience that you had as a pharmaceutical salesperson. I would imagine, I can only imagine and assert that has helped in your process and system of selling. Tell us a little bit about that and that journey with selling, because that's one of the things that many of our listeners would say is one of not their thing, right? There's many technicians that really great bookkeepers, but they don't have a sales background. They don't have a management background or building a business background. So I'd love to hear your take on that.
So for me, I never think of myself as selling. I would never in a million years want to corner somebody into working with me or be convincing somebody to work with me. They either want to or they don't. Now, of course, I'm putting my best foot forward and all of those things. But my experience as a pharmaceutical sales rep, like I said, I never was selling to the doctors. I was building relationships and being valuable to them. And by doing that, there were several years that for my primary drug that I sold, I was number one in the country. And I wasn't talking about the drugs I was selling. It was because I was valuable to them in their practice in other ways. And while I don't recommend that necessarily, it wasn't necessarily what the corporate structure was looking for. It was for me very informative. So, like in my marketing, I'm exclusively a content marketer. There are no paid ads. There's nothing like that. I want to be a resource to people. And when people see me as a resource, then oftentimes by the time they contact me to work with them, they've already kind of made up their mind. As long as, the price works out in the way that they would like, or as long as my services coincide with what they are wanting to get, then they've already kind of made up their mind that they want to hire me by the time they contact me to begin with. So I never really sell anything. I would say, though, also I am a practicing Christian, and years ago I decided that God was the best salesperson I could possibly have, and I was going to trust him to bring me who he wanted to work with me. And I have stuck with that, and it has brought me a lot more success than failure. And I think one of my favorite things about my client base, I have people from all walks of life, all colors, all cultures, all religions. And I think that comes from my faith that God's going to bring me who he wants me to work with.
I love that. Very refreshing concept. And you don't hear it all that much these days. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about that. First off, just some thoughts on my end around your sales strategy. It's not a strategy, it's just you being who you are. And it's the non-sales sale. It's like it sells itself when you are interested in other people, when you do things to help them and identify things to help them. I mean, hey, who wouldn't want that?
Right.
Give me more of that, right? It sells itself. You go into a restaurant and it's terrible, you're not going to go back. You go in and they make you feel like you're part of the family. It's like, guess what? You are, and you're going to be coming back. So I love that. And I think it takes the pressure out of it. I mean, even to say sales, I mean, the word sales, that is what it is and should be and has been. But so many people don't know that, do it, or practice it. It gives it a bad name. But if you do what you've been saying there, is going in and there's a little layer there to you that I hear. It's that confidence. Like, you have a certain confidence. You're very clear about who you're going to work with, who you're not going to work with. That sells. That's one of those things that to repel others attracts. It's the law of the universe, right? Is that if we're pushing one thing away, another thing is coming towards us. And so you've really done some things that lead to that, which is, for our listener, like, being really clear about who's a yes for you and who's a no for you will increase your confidence just in that, because you're going to start attracting those type of people to your business. And once they're in your business, it's like, wow, I have a better business because I have better clients, and that gives you more confidence. So you're doing some really great things there.
And, Michael, one thing I would add to that is, first of all, I could not agree more that knowing who you want to work with and who you don't is crucial in being confident in moving forward with different people. On top of that, I recognize when someone's first getting started that it feels so urgent to get whatever business you possibly can. And I don't want to diminish those feelings and the way that feels. I had someone very early on kind of grant me permission to take on someone I know I'm not going to keep forever. And that was really good for me, because, again, I'm the kind of person that builds long-term relationships, not flash in the pan relationships. But there were a couple of clients that I took on early for the experience and what have you that I could have told you. I know that the average life cycle of a client is going to be about 7 years, and I doubt this one's going to be that long. And that gave me permission to kind of stretch my legs and test some things out before settling on who I knew I wanted to work with. I think oftentimes when someone's starting, they feel like they have to have a niche. They have to know exactly who they work with before they can ever get started. And I don't think that's necessarily realistic if you haven't been exposed to a lot of different types of businesses.
Absolutely. If you've never gone in and eaten a new cuisine, how are you going to know which one you like, right?
Right.
It is. There's constant talk of getting it all right out of the gate, right?
Yeah.
And we certainly, as people that have gone through and made all the mistakes, or lots of them, and still many more to come, it's don't want to, you don't want other people to have to make those mistakes if you don't have to. But if you don't put your boot all the way down into the mud puddle, you're not going to know that, hey, that doesn't feel good. I don't like that.
Exactly.
Actually, my son does like that. But,
my little one jumped in mud last night, and I made her clean her shoes herself, and she was appalled by it.
Yeah, it's not getting the mud in the boot. It's actually having to be involved in the cleanup. I love that strategy. That's great. But it's one that I love that you brought that up, and being able to that you'll have to make mistakes. It's like minimize the mistakes and learn from others certainly helps. And I do really like that your sales approach is non-salesy. It's very consultative by the sounds of it. And also you're doing something where you're leveraging all your past experiences and knowledge, which also it becomes part of the package, right? Right. I love that, because as I said earlier on, it would be very difficult for anyone to compete with you, because you bring very unique views of the world, and every single person out there can create that because we're all unique individuals. And the more you can bring that to your business, the more it's very unique, and people will pay more for things that are unique and scarce.
Absolutely. And that's something, when I first was getting started, I felt like not being a CPA was a weakness. And now I recognize that for me, not for others necessarily, but for me, not being a CPA is the greatest strength that I have in my business, because I'm bringing something different than my clients have had before.
So I'd love to. We spoke or I mentioned mistakes. Looking back, what do you feel were some of the ones that you're like, you mentioned one there a little bit, which was like, I'm not a CPA, I'm just a bookkeeper, and you realize that that's actually who you are is actually probably even more powerful by not being a CPA, because you're right in there to trenches helping these business owners build the business that's going to fuel their generations of wealth.
Yeah. And, everybody makes mistakes. The one that I always kind of beat myself up over is the most natural one in the world, I think. And it's embarrassing for me as a process and systems engineer, is that even as I was encouraging my clients to make sure they had well-documented processes in their business, I wasn't taking the time, often because I have different deadlines for different clients for their monthly deliverables. And so like just yesterday, the 5th business day of the month, I had a set of end of month deliverables that had to go in, and I would feel those time crunches and put off till the next month, putting pen to paper and documenting the processes that needed to be followed. And that made it so much harder to bring on another bookkeeper, because I then had to take the time to document those and before I could ever hand it off to someone else. And that, like I say, it's an embarrassing thing to admit, but the cobbler's kids have no shoes, as they say. And it is what it is. But I do think for me that's the big mistake that I made, because I would have been able to take on a little bit more quickly if I had done that as it came up.
Well, it's not an uncommon one. I mean,
Right.
You are busy working in your business, growing it, doing all the bits and bobs, and it's often the very last thing that any business does in their business, which is create your own systems and processes and documentation, because it's very time consuming and it's rapidly changing all the time, which you need to go back and rebuild it, change it, update it, all those good things. Which is probably a good segue into your story as a pure bookkeeping licensee. What drew you to pure bookkeeping?
I remember when I first heard about pure bookkeeping and started looking into it, it was something I knew was a logical step once I had reached a certain size. And mostly because I didn't have the accounting background. So while I knew very well that I was capable of doing all the things, a lot of times I'd have to stop and research something. I don't have to as much anymore, and certainly not because of the pure bookkeeping part. But I knew that the pure bookkeeping system was going to minimize the uncertainties or the things that I had to research. Instead, it would be like having a very experienced bookkeeper looking over my shoulder and reminding me of what I needed to do next and what holes I might have in my processes. And so that I always knew it was something I would adopt at some point. And honestly, I wish I had adopted it a little bit sooner.
And why is that? Just because of the fact that it would have, like, now seeing it, what piece of that?
It would have paid for itself in a way that I didn't realize it would have paid for itself. The amount of time saved and just the general resource available is just it's such a tremendous asset in the business to have that. And again, I feel like had I adopted it sooner, I would have gotten my processes documented sooner, and I could have grown faster if I had had all of that at my disposal a little bit earlier.
Yeah, it's definitely not the first time I've heard that, which is one of those things. Everybody, like we say, we have to learn, and hopefully we can help others not make the same mistakes that others have made. But what's interesting to me, I mean, I've been at this for almost 12 years now, working with the bookkeeping in the industry and working with bookkeepers in the United States, Canada, and Australia. And when it comes to time and the savings that you mentioned, it's actually just very recently that we've actually quantified the amount of time that is saved. It was never spoken. People that had implemented systems and all the processes and the community that they would have, they were just like, well, I just feel like I feel less stressed. I feel less overwhelmed. It was never quantified with this cost of time is actually, and which is, that's probably embarrassing to me as like a, business student, been working in business for 25, 30 years, whatever it is now. And goodness gracious, get old fast here. Is that, yes, it's not so much time saved, it's actually time back is what, and that's the thing that people like yourself, other licensees, were feeling. It was like, I got my time back. I feel better. I feel I can sleep better at night because I know things are getting done and I haven't missed a part of the puzzle. So it's very cool to hear. And absolutely, we've quantified the return on investment is dramatic when you actually value your time. What you could be billing clients, or you could be using that time to go on vacation, or you could be using that time to spend time with your family. There's a value to it.
Absolutely. And that's, again, going back to my mission to build a business that serves my family instead of the other way around, and helping my clients do the same. That extra time is when I'm able to go to my daughter's tennis matches or my other daughter's soccer games or basketball games, or, spend a weekend at the church cooking for a group of kids. I'm able to do other things that are what life are really about, because I don't have this backlog of stuff sitting in my head that needs to be translated out into the world.
Wonderful to hear. Well, it's exciting that it's providing the results that you wanted to get from it, and building up your business so you can help more people. I mean, we think of it for ourselves, and this podcast is literally creating the best place on earth for bookkeepers and to come and be together and learn together. That's the Successful Bookkeeper. And then Pure Bookkeeping is to help great bookkeepers build their business and transform the bookkeeping industry. And then the next layer of that is to help, because we want you helping those small business owners like you're doing. It's so fantastic to hear. There's so many of them that need it. So many.
Yes.
And the impact of not having a business going in the right direction is just really, really challenging for families and everyone involved.
Yes. And that's going back to that lesson when I was 11 or 12 years old of my dad saying, I know how to be a doctor, but I don't have any idea how to run a business. And he had been running one for 20 years at that point. I think oftentimes bookkeepers and those who are looking to move into a more advisory role don't recognize that about the business owners that they are working with, because it comes naturally to them. They don't value the expertise that they have in the way they need to. Business owners are desperate for advice and for a professional that they can bounce ideas off of and come up with real solid financial plans and foundations for their businesses. And we have something very valuable to share with them. And it's important that that bookkeepers and advisors have that confidence in knowing that what they are providing is needed, it is necessary, and it is oftentimes the difference between a successful business and a failure for those business owners.
Very well said. And I'm really clear that a business that's working with you, their grandchildren are going to be thanking their grandchildren's grandchildren are going to be thanking you. They're going to have
You're
a little
too
picture.
kind.
Yeah, they're going to picture up on the wall, and
I hope not.
it's good. It's the what gets me out of bed is helping people like yourself and the many licensees and the listeners that we have. It's because I know, our stories are similar in that, your dad was a physician, but my dad was a master electrician and had a contracting business, and he didn't know how to run a business either.
Right.
He was good at what he did. He was great at it. He was very passionate about what he did, but he didn't have a great team. Certainly didn't have a great bookkeeper. And so it's always part of my personal mission is to make a difference for people like my dad today, because I see the impacts. I just know, when you've got a small business that's working or a medium-sized business working, the difference it makes for that person, their family, their staff, and the family of those staff. It's ripple effect. So
absolutely,
it does good work. Well, you're doing great work there out in the world. I just absolutely love it. And I'd love to know if there's anything else you'd like to share with our listener before we start to wrap up our show.
I don't think so. I think, like I told you before, I've listened to your podcast almost every week, and I'm always taking away little nuggets here and there. And I always enjoy listening to you, and I'm glad to have gotten to come on.
Oh, lovely. I just feel like we could do a whole bunch of episodes with you into your strategy. And this has just been an absolute pleasure listening to you and your story. And it's been an honor to have you. So with, on behalf of our listeners, thank you for your generosity coming on the show and sharing with us today.
Truly my pleasure.
Wonderful. And with that, we wrap another episode of the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. To learn more about today's wonderful guest and to get access to all sorts of valuable free business building resources, you can go to thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Until next time, goodbye.
You've been listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with Michael Palmer. For more information and to download the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit us at thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Thank you for listening.